Fall camp. Fall camp is here. I remember in 2016, this was my first fall camp, not being a high school coach. And I'm at the University of Houston, and shout out to the staff that hired me there. I'm in the restroom talking to a coach. I'm like, man, this fall camp, it'd be my first one not being a coach. It's probably not going to be as intense. And the coach was like, Jones, you have no idea. Jones, it's like putting your face on a train and a train running over your face. This fall camp stuff is crazy. I was like, whoa, okay. I got it, coach. But he honestly was telling me absolute truth. And so I have this fall camp series for you all. Just talk about player development fall camp. Before I get into tip number one, I just want to talk about this great opportunity that you all in player development have during fall camp. You all that want to get in the role. Fall camp to me is one of the most foundational aspects of the season. You know, it's a great time for the young men to compete for positions. For football, if you have another sport, maybe it's young women, but the opportunity to compete for the position. And you all have heard me talk multiple times about not programming during fall camp, but there is a lot you can do in the player development role during fall camp. You know, the biggest thing is being there for the players. Now, their schedule is packed from 6 a.m. to whenever, right, with things to do. But they will find time to be around the people they care for. And so you want to make sure in the role that you are one of those people. You're there, you're available for them, you see them, you're saying hello to them at practice. You know, some of the times I found out in fall camp when players are most vulnerable are when they're eating, when they're in the training room, when they're in transition to practice, and when they're in transition to meetings. Outside of course, coming to your room and just giving you everything. But you have those opportunities during fall camp. You're there all day with them. And one thing I did in fall camp, outside of making sure I was there for them, was you watch body language. You watch habits. You know, you can start seeing players get annoyed of going against their teammates day after day. You can see them get annoyed of their coaches, annoyed by the heat, just annoyed with the aspect of not having really an outside life during this time. So you all that are in player development, you know, fall camp is a great opportunity, an incredible opportunity to dive into relationships. I'll use one example. I had my first year in player development at the University of Houston. We had a young cornerback, freshman, who was, you know, part of this highly touted recruiting class. And it was tough. You know, he was the man on his campus, and first week was tough. A lot of not being in the right position, a lot of, you know, being on the end of some tense moments because he's out of place, coaches getting after him. And I remember eating breakfast with him, and he was just like, man, like, coach, this is tough. Like, I don't know if I could do it. And I was able to encourage him. And as time went on, he started making plays. He started spending more time watching film. He started to get things done. And in 2 weeks, you know, or by the end of week 2, you started to see a smile on his face. But I always think back to that moment of sitting down with that young man and just encouraging him and saying, hey, you're supposed to be here. You're supposed to be here. And that's just one example of the moments you have during player development. You know, I've heard, you know, I've been able, some players have shared with me that they have kids on the way. I've known, unfortunately, when kids are going to move on or quit or transfer, whatever it may be, make the best decision for themselves. But once again, you get all these opportunities in fall camp. So you all are getting ready for fall camp, truly excited for you. Make the most of it. You all that have training camp internships, I saw my guy Alexander Martin post this on LinkedIn, and you're in either player engagement, you're around the players, or you're just in the building. If you're in the building, you want a career in this field, and you're in the building during training camp, make the most of it because you're around the players so much. You're around the coaching staff. You have a great opportunity to make an impact. Now, let's get to tip number 1 of fall camp for player development. Okay, anyway. All right, so fall camp, for you all that are listening to this and you've listened to that, I guess you would call it monologue. Before getting to this point, you may say, well, what is fall camp? What is he talking about? Fall camp is the preparation for the season. It is normally starts in August, and it's about 3 to 4 weeks where it's just, I was looking for a schedule to show you all, but I didn't have one. But it's just intense football. You wake up, breakfast, film, walk through, practice, meal, lift, walk through, practice, film. Well, not practice. We don't do 2 days anymore. lift, walk through, film, It's just meal. It's just boop, boop, boop. They know where they're going, right? And so fall camp, it has to happen before the season. Once again, as I said earlier, I think it's the most pivotal part going into the season. It's a grind for everybody. I don't know one person who's ever been in a fall camp who's been like, yay, fall camp. I love fall camp. Now, I'll admit, you love it the first day. It's like, man, the new season's here. And actually, I was at the Chiefs training camp this past weekend, and I miss fall camp, miss training camp. I miss it. But there are some things that I don't think a lot of people like in fall camp. Fall camp can be very stressful for not only players, but the staff and their families. Now, let me go back. When you're planning for fall camp, you start having meetings in July. So in July, you start having meetings with either your chief of staff or director of operations, and they're talking about fall camp. They're showing you schedules. They're talking about where people are going to be. Maybe you're taking the players off campus, hotel, another city, whatever it may be. But they're talking about how it's going to look. And most likely when they do it, after the talks, you're going to get something like this on your desk, right? A fall camp manual. In the fall camp manual, this is the rule book for fall camp. And so tip number 1 for fall camp is to know the daily schedule. Now, those fall camp, it could be a packet, it could be a 3-ring binder, it could be one of these binded notebook thingies, but they're gonna have a detailed calendar for every single day of camp. It is an incredible document put together, but every single minute is marked in that whatever you want to call it, this guide to the entire camp. It's marked. Sorry, I had a little there, but it's marked. And you, as a player development professional, need to know the schedule. Now, I'll say this: it's great to start. And when I used to get those things, I used to put it in my personal calendar, my work calendar. I used to write it in my calendar. I wrote it on my board. I let my wife know. It really gets like that, because you have to know the schedule. Because if you miss the wrong time, or you get one day mixed up with another day, that can knock you off the track, right? And so you have to know your daily calendar. Now, the first couple days, it kind of sticks to script, but as you know, anything with schedules or anything with sports, it's going to change. And so when it changes, you have to communicate with the people who know the changes are coming. And the reason why it's so important to know the changes and to know the daily schedule is because most of the time in the role, I not only communicated with players, but I also communicated with staff or other people in different roles who were servicing our players, be it equipment, be it the strength staff, be it our nutrition dietitian staff, sports med, they normally knew before anybody, be it other people. I was able to communicate that with our players and other staff members. So when you know it's updated, and I didn't even care if it wasn't updated. Like they could literally print it and put it on my desk. And some places did that. Shout out to those director ops that did that. They would get up before everybody and put a new one on your desk if it was different than what was in the manual. And so even though they would put that on my desk, I would go in their office and annoy them. Sorry to all of you all that I annoyed, and say, hey, is this the schedule for today? Why? Because as I said earlier, I had to stay on top of it. Now, my first couple years in it, not even first couple years, my first week I learned this lesson, and it just made it made a big difference for me in the role from that point on, because you're sitting there looking at the schedule like, oh, 1:30, they said it'll be, break, and then they switch and 1:30 is now a walkthrough because the weather has changed camp. So you could have changes because of the weather. Coaching staff sees something. It could be the amount of players available. There's a lot of different things that can change the schedule. At one university, at the University of Houston, some of our players were actually in class during the start of fall camp. Either the start or either like towards the end, but they were in class. And so that changed some of our schedules. So you got to stay on top of the schedule. If you're in the role during fall camp, please know the daily schedule. It is so important to know for your role, because you service so many players that need to know where to go, and it just helps you in the role know where to be so you can be most effective when communicating with players and being that person, that consistent person they see all throughout fall camp. So that's today's video. If any of that helped you, please like and subscribe. I didn't even introduce myself because I got straight into it, but I'm Ed Jones. I'm the founder of Beyond the Field program and the host of this podcast, the Player Development Pod. Appreciate you being here with us, but don't stop your player development learning. Check out these videos here. Hey, check them out. No.